She said we didn't understand the situation, that she was a single mom doing her best, that sometimes she needed help from friends, that we were blowing everything out of proportion. The whole neighborhood would gossip about her. I told her I didn't care about gossip. I cared about Susie's safety. Susan started crying, but it felt fake, like she was putting on a show. She kept saying we were ruining her life over nothing. Susie was still silent through all of this. She hadn't said a word since her mom grabbed her. I knelt down to her level again. I asked if she wanted to come inside for some hot chocolate while the adults talked. Susan practically screamed no. She pulled Susie behind her like I was trying to kidnap her kid. She said she'd sue us if we tried anything, that she knew her rights as a parent. We couldn't just take her child. Christopher was already on the phone with someone. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but Susan was getting more and more panicked. She kept switching between threats and begging. One second she'd say we'd regret this. The next she'd cry about being a victim. Then she played her last card. She said she'd tell everyone I touched Susie inappropriately during trick-or-treating. That's why I gave her a different costume, because I'm some kind of predator who wanted to see her change clothes. I actually laughed. It was so absurd. There were like 20 other parents around when I gave Susie that costume. Everyone saw Susan dress her kid like that, but Susan didn't care about logic. She was desperate. She started yelling about how I was always watching her daughter, how I was obsessed with their family, that I was jealous because she was prettier than me, so I was trying to steal her child. The accusations got wilder and wilder. Christopher finished his call and put his phone away. He told Susan that child services would be sending someone tomorrow, that they'd want to talk to both her and Susie. Susan's face went white. She started backing toward her car, still dragging Susie with her. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into her daughter's small shoulder. I stepped aside. No point in physically stopping them now. Christopher had made the call. The authorities would handle it from here. Susan practically threw Susie into the back seat and peeled out of my driveway like she was in a car chase. The smell of burnt rubber lingered in the air. Christopher and I stood there for a minute. Neither of us said anything. We just watched their taillights disappear down the street. The silence felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Then we went inside and I made myself some tea. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the kettle. Christopher rubbed my shoulders, but I couldn't relax. The next morning, I woke up to about 50 text messages. My phone had been buzzing all night, but I'd been too exhausted to check. Word had gotten around the neighborhood fast. Some parents were asking what happened. Others were sharing their own weird Susan stories. Turns out I wasn't the only one who'd noticed something off about her. Grace from down the street said Susan had asked her husband to babysit once. Just Susie, for a few hours. But she dressed the kid in a crop top and mini skirt for a play date. The outfit looked like something a teenager would wear to a club, not something for a 6-year-old. Grace's husband had refused and Susan had called him gay for not appreciating beauty. Another mom, Maria, said Susan had brought Susie to her son's birthday party last year. She'd spent the whole time taking photos of Susie posing with the dads, not the kids, just the grown men. Maria thought it was weird but didn't want to cause drama. She'd mentioned it to her husband later, and he'd noticed it too. The stories kept coming. Susan making Susie do fashion shows for her male friends. Susan teaching Susie to sit on men's laps at barbecues. Susan telling Susie that being pretty was more important than being smart. Each message made my stomach turn a little more. It was like everyone had a piece of the puzzle, but nobody had put it together. I was reading through all these messages when my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Susan standing there. She was alone. No Susie. She was wearing normal clothes for once. Jeans and a sweater. Her face looked different without all the makeup. Older. More tired. I didn't open the door. I talked to her through it instead. Asked what she wanted. She said she needed to explain. That I'd gotten everything wrong last night. That she'd been up all night thinking about how to make me understand. Her voice sounded hoarse, like she'd been crying. She sounded different. Calmer. More rational. But I still didn't trust her. I told her to talk through the door. She sighed but started talking anyway. She said she'd had Susie young. Only 19. The dad had bailed immediately. Left her with nothing but stretch marks and a baby. She'd been struggling ever since. Working 2 jobs. No family to help. No support system. She'd done some things she wasn't proud of to make ends meet. Dating men who'd buy them groceries. Letting them spoil Susie with gifts. Her voice cracked a little when she talked about the electricity being shut off last winter. Maybe she'd blurred some lines. Maybe she'd let things go too far. But she'd never let anyone hurt her daughter. She loved Susie more than anything. She was just trying to survive in a world that didn't care about single moms. The desperation in her voice almost sounded genuine. It was a good sob story. Probably would have worked on me a year ago. But after what I'd heard last night, I wasn't buying it. I told her she needed to leave. That she could explain everything to child services. That maybe they could help her get the resources she actually needed. That's when her tone changed again. The mask dropped completely. She said I was making a huge mistake. That I didn't know who I was messing with. That she had connections. People who owed her favors. She could make my life very difficult. Her voice had gone cold, calculating. I told her I was recording our conversation. I wasn't, but she didn't know that. She went quiet for a second. Then she laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. Said it didn't matter. That nobody would believe me anyway. I was just a bored housewife making up drama. She left after that, but I had a bad feeling she wasn't done. I watched through the window as she sat in her car for a few minutes before driving away. I was right about the bad feeling. That afternoon, I started getting weird friend requests on social media. Random men I'd never met. Their profiles were mostly empty. Just a few photos and barely any friends. I ignored them at first. Then the messages started. Nothing threatening exactly. Just creepy. Comments about how pretty I looked. Asking if I was single. Saying they'd heard about me from a friend. One guy sent a photo of my house. I blocked them all and made my profiles private immediately, but it didn't stop there. The next day, I found a note on my car. It said I should be careful. That accidents happen. That I should think about my kids. The handwriting was messy. Rushed. I took it straight to the police. They said they'd look into it, but without proof it was from Susan, there wasn't much they could do. The officer seemed bored, like this was just another neighborhood dispute. Christopher wanted to install security cameras. I agreed. We got them set up that weekend. Good thing too, because Sunday night they caught someone sneaking around our backyard. It was too dark to see clearly, but they were definitely trying to look in our windows. They spent almost 20 minutes creeping around before finally leaving. Monday morning, child services finally showed up at Susan's house. I know because she texted me about it. Sent me a long rant about how I'd ruined her life, how Susie was traumatized by strange people asking questions, how this was all my fault. The messages came in rapid fire, full of typos and rage. I didn't respond, but I did screenshot everything. Started keeping a folder of all her messages and threats. Christopher said I was being paranoid, but something told me I'd need evidence later. I labeled everything with dates and times. Turns out I was right about that too. Tuesday was when things got really weird. I was at the grocery store when I noticed a man following following me. Same guy from one of those friend requests. I recognized his profile picture. He stayed about an aisle behind me the whole time. Never approached, just watched. He even put items in his cart but never looked at them, his eyes always on me. I abandoned my cart and went straight to my car. He followed me to the parking lot but kept his distance. I drove home a crazy route to make sure he wasn't following. Spent the whole drive checking my mirrors. My heart was pounding the entire time. I called Christopher from the car, needing to hear his voice. When I got home, there was another note. This one was taped to my front door. It said I should mind my own business, that I'd been warned, that next time they wouldn't be so nice. This one was typed, printed on plain white paper. I called the police again. Same response. No proof, no help. They were starting to recognize my voice. Christopher was furious. He wanted to confront Susan directly. I told him that was a bad idea. We didn't know what she was capable of, or who these men were. We needed to be smart about this. Document everything and let the authorities handle it. But I could see the frustration in his eyes. He felt helpless. But the authorities weren't handling it fast enough. Child Services was investigating, but wouldn't tell us anything. The police said the notes could be from anyone, and Susan was getting bolder. She started showing up places she knew I'd be, always with perfect timing. The park where I took my kids, the coffee shop I went to every Thursday, the gym where I did yoga. She'd just happened to be there, always watching, always smirking. Sometimes she'd wave like we were old friends. Once she even bought my coffee before I could, sliding it across the counter with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was creepy as hell. The other moms started noticing too. They asked why Susan was suddenly everywhere I was. I told them about the notes and the stalking. Most of them believed me. They'd seen how weird Susan was, but some thought I was being dramatic. The neighborhood was starting to divide. One mom, Jean, actually defended Susan, said she was probably just upset about the Child Services thing, that I should have talked to her privately instead of getting authorities involved, that we should handle things between ourselves like adults. Jean had always been the peacekeeper type, avoiding conflict at all costs. I wanted to scream. This wasn't about some petty neighborhood drama. This was about a little girl's safety. But Jean didn't want to hear it. She said I was causing unnecessary problems, making everyone uncomfortable, ruining the neighborhood vibe, as if the vibe was more important than a child's well-being. A few other moms agreed with Jean. They started avoiding me at school pickup, whispering when I walked by, acting like I was the problem. It hurt, but I tried not to let it get to me. I knew I'd done the right thing. Still, the isolation stung. Then Susan played her next card. She started spreading rumors about me, told people I was having an affair, that Christopher and I were getting divorced, that I was projecting my own issues onto her. Some people actually believed it. The lies spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. My kids started coming home with questions. Isabella asked why her friend's mom said I was a bad person. My son Daniel wanted to know if daddy was moving out. It broke my heart. Susan was using my own children against me. I had to have conversations with them that no parent should have to have. I tried to stay calm.